On my money about IRS bank levies, Free Now ask, how does the IRS know where you bank? They say, I had my bank levied upon by the IRS. I never gave them my banking information. I never received a 1099 from my bank. As my account doesn't gain much interest, I can't imagine the IRS receive a 1099. Does the IRS simply call or write banks where you live to find out where you bank? The answer is yes, they can issue summons to banks requesting information about you and your financial records and your bank statements and things like that. Can the IRS simply put your social security number in some kind of computer database to find where you bank? Very strange. So that second question, the answer is no, it's not quite that simple. However, the IRS does maintain its own database of what it calls levy sources for a given taxpayer. It says levy source data comes from a variety of sources, and many of these you mentioned Free Now, right? Informational returns, right? Forms W-2, 1099s, estates. If you have any dealings with a state that runs through a bank account. This one's interesting, credit bureaus. You may see the IRS doing an inquiry for your credit report, right? So if you have a credit card, right, IRS will see that on your credit report, and they could kind of piece things together about where you bank. They could maybe even issue a summons to that bank where you have the credit card, well, where the payment's being made from. There are ways. The IRS has some pretty awesome powers when it comes to this type of stuff. Oh, and guess what? Other third parties. That could be literally anyone out of the 7 billion people in the world, right? Or is it more than that now? I don't know. The taxpayer, right? Like when you call them up, and sometimes they'll ask you, where do you bank? Checks, right? So, they have this whole, levy sources part of the IRM where it kind of goes into this stuff. But, to answer your question, Free Now, no, it's not like they have this, like, supercomputer database where I type your SSN and it spits out, your bank account. But they have pretty awesome powers in getting that information and piecing things together if they want to. In fact, and I've been wanting to talk about this Supreme Court case for a while. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court decided this case, Polselli versus IRS. And it was all about, the whole case was about a guy who owed taxes, and the IRS issued summons to various banks, Wells Fargo, I think Bank of America, Chase, not for his accounts, right? But for his wife's accounts and his lawyer's accounts, right? And in this case, the taxpayers were trying to say, well, this was not right for the IRS to do this without providing notice, because the tax code says when you summons third-party information, you got to provide notice, right? And the IRS said, no, this falls into one of the exceptions, right? And I'll pull it up here. The IRS said, no, we don't have to provide notice as required under this section because this was an exception, right? You don't have to give notice to any summons issued in aid of the collection of an assessment made or judgment rendered against the person with respect to whose liability the summons is issued, right? So because this summons was issued by an IRS revenue officer to aid collection of an assessment, they said, well, it falls within this exception. The taxpayers were saying, well, no, this exception only applies if the taxpayer, the person with respect to whose liability the summons is issued, has an interest in the account, right? So you'd have to give notice if it's the wife's account, where the taxpayer doesn't have an interest in it, or their lawyer's account, right? And the Supreme Court agreed with the IRS. They said, no, you didn't have to give a notice in that situation. Kind of on this note, to kind of answer Free Now's question, you can kind of see these other exceptions in here, right? So you don't have to give notice to any summons issued to determine whether or not records of the business transactions or affairs of an identified person have been made or kept, or issued solely to determine the identity of any person having a numbered account, like a bank account, with a bank or other institution, right? So yes, that tells me the IRS does issue these summons to banks periodically to learn who banks there, right? But kind of getting back to this Polselli case, I'm sorry if this bores you, but I've been wanting to talk about this case for a while because it's not very often that like tax collections cases go to the Supreme Court. this one did. And I've been wanting to talk about it for a while, but I haven't really found the opportunity. So entertain me here. So let's go. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the opinion. So basically, here's what happened. Remo Polselli underpaid his federal taxes to the tune of about $2 million. He had a revenue officer assigned, Mr. Michael Bryant. Okay. And Bryant developed a few leads in his search for assets that Mr. Polselli may have been concealing. Right. And Bryant focused on bank accounts belonging to Mr. Polselli's wife. Oh, it's unhighlighting. That's interesting. Okay. And also bank accounts for Polselli's law firm, Abraham and Rose. So Bryant issued these summons, to all these banks for these things. And he did not provide notice to any of the third parties, right? The wife or the lawyers. Okay. And basically the taxpayers are saying that they should have given them notice. And the Supreme Court said, nope, that's not the case. No notice was required. And this is kind of interesting language here that Roberts used at the end. We do not dismiss any apprehension about the scope of the IRS's authority to issue summonses, right? Because this is pretty far-reaching authority, right? Like if I owe the IRS money, okay, so, and they're trying to get money from me, wow, they can... They can issue a summons. They can find out where my wife banks and then issue, let's say she had we have joint accounts, but let's say she had a separate account, and then issue a summons to her bank for her bank information, right? Even if I'm not on that account, and they can do that to my lawyers. That's some pretty invasive stuff, folks, right? And I hope you would agree with me on that. The court recognize this, right? And they say, as we have said, the authority vested in tax collectors may be abused as all powers are subject to abuse. That's from this case. Tax investigations often involve the pursuit of sensitive records. In this case, for instance, the IRS sought information from law firms concerning client accounts, as well as the wife's account. And basically, but they said, well, even so, even with these apprehensions we have, the focus here was, did the law say that they would have to give notice if they're issuing summons to the wife in the law firm? And the court ruled no, right? Because that's not what the law says, right? And Roberts kind of leaves this kind of discussion here for another time, right? He says, this is not the case to try to define the precise bounds of the phrase "in aid of the collection," right? Which is the statutory language in over here, right? If the notice is issued in aid of the collection of an assessment, right, then you don't have to give notice. Okay. So anyway, folks, sorry if that was a little bit boring. Personally, I think this is pretty scary. That the IRS has this power, and now this power has been, affirmed by the Supreme Court. Who knows what else they're going to try, right? Especially as they get more money, as they are going to have some more manpower rolled out here in the next 10 years. I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, right? People should pay their taxes, right? Tax crooks should be caught. But for those of you out there who are watching my channel because, you owe the IRS or you haven't filed and they're probably going to catch up to you eventually, I would say, yeah, this is some scary stuff, right? And even from a broader perspective, the whole privacy thing, right? And that's acknowledged in Robert's opinion here. I mean, where is that line drawn, right? And Robert's kind of left that kind of open-ended, like this isn't the case to have that try to define what that means. Anyway, interesting stuff. Thank you for the question. Free now. It is a good one. The IRS, yeah, they can ask banks for your information, whether or not you bank there, et cetera, et cetera. I have some other tax relief videos on the left-hand side of your screen. If you have unfiled tax returns, you owe the IRS or your state a lot of money in taxes, give us a call, 866-8000-TAX, or fill out the form at our website, choicetaxrelief.com, or you can click the free consultation button there at the top of the website, and we will reach out to you. All right, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.